Hey guys, tonight we're gliding quietly through the dusty myths of ancient Greece, where goddesses don't always play fair and a girl with a loom ends up rewriting history by accident. You're not a hero, a demigod, or even a talking animal tonight. You're just you. Wandering, tired, maybe a little lost. You're standing at the edge of a sunburned village in Bronze Age Boeotia, somewhere between before calendars and after sandals were cool. The air smells like scorched olives, sheep sweat, and maybe a hint of old bronze. A rooster is screaming like it owes someone money. You trudge in with sandals full of pebbles blinking against the sunlight, trying to figure out why no one will look you in the eye. The villagers, mostly hunched elders and wide-eyed kids, all seem to be avoiding one particular house. It's not cursed exactly, but something about it gives people the willies. Low whispers follow your steps. You catch phrases like, "Weaver girl, no respect," and "the gods are watching." So obviously you go there. The house is made of clay and reed like most things here, but the doorway is lined with thread. Pale strands pulled so finely they shimmer. Someone has hung a tiny pattern of dolphins above the door, woven straight into the lintel like it's no big deal. You duck inside and immediately feel the temperature drop. The sunlight filters through cloth hung from the ceiling. Looms crowd the room like patient wooden beasts, silent, but somehow judging you. And then you see her. A girl, maybe 17, with dark hair in a braided crown and arms dusted in yarn fluff. She doesn't see you at first. Her hands are busy, and when you look down, you see why. Her loom holds a scene so precise you swear the woven sea actually moves. Dolphins leap. A ship crests a wave. There's even a little sailor whose expression looks like he's regretting all his life choices. She notices you, finally gives a barely there nod, and gets back to work. You sit. Watch. Hours pass. No one speaks. The shuttle whispers across the threads like a bedtime secret. And then, finally, someone breaks the silence. But it's not you. It's a hunched woman at the door, throwing shade with a tone that could sour milk. You work like you're better than the gods, Arachne. The weaver doesn't flinch, doesn't even blink. I am better. And there it is. You, a mere mortal visitor, physically recoil, as if Zeus himself might drop a thunderbolt through the roof. But Arachne, she just shrugs like she said it before. Maybe she has. Maybe the gods just haven't been paying attention until now. Outside, a breeze kicks up, sending dust swirling in lazy eddies. Somewhere, a goat sneezes. The village holds its collective breath. And so do you, because you've just walked straight into the prologue of a myth that'll end in transformation, divine judgment, artistic audacity, and more drama than a season finale of Olympus's next top deity. And whether you know it or not, sleep-deprived traveler, you're staying for the whole show. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fun to see who else is drifting off with the gods. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The house smells like lanolin and stubbornness. Arachne's fingers are already dancing again across her loom. The room thrums softly with thread tension and unspoken pride. You begin to notice details. Her threads are dyed in shades of indigo and saffron you've never seen before. The patterns, mythic beasts, swirling cloudsfish that shimmer, aren't copied from anywhere. She invents them as she weaves like a composer writing music in real time. Word around the village is she never studied with anyone. No priestesses, no nymphs, no secret divine tutors in disguise. Just picked it up, someone muttered to you outside, like some people whistle. Historians still argue whether Arachne really claimed to have invented new weaving techniques or just mastered old ones to perfection. Some say her patterns were so complex they caused dizziness in viewers. Others think that's just an ancient way of saying too much talent, not enough modesty. One thing's for sure, she doesn't make coasters. She makes epics. But that pride, it's more than confidence. It's almost defiance. As if each perfect row of threads dares the gods to say something. And as you sit there rubbing sleep from your eyes and watching the room darken into twilight, you get the creeping sense that maybe someone is watching. Because in Greek myth, the gods don't just read the Yelp reviews. They hear everything. The next morning you wake with a crick in your neck and a piece of yarn stuck to your lip. Someone's draped a light wool blanket over you. It smells like rosemary and sheep. Arachne is already up, of course, weaving in the corner, like the concept of day off never existed. She hums a little tune, something haunting and tuneless, as if the loom itself composed it. You glance outside. The village is quieter than yesterday. No shouting vendors, no arguing neighbors, no giggling children kicking amphora like soccer balls. Just hush, the kind of hush that means something's coming. Or someone. You shuffle toward the loom. Arachne doesn't look up, but she gestures toward a small cup of barley tea sitting nearby. It's lukewarm, but blessedly free of goat hairs. As you sip, she finally speaks. They're talking about me again. You blink. Who? She shrugs. Everyone. Olympus, probably. That's not a thing people usually say. Not without irony. But she says it like she's talking about weather. Like rain clouds or overly dramatic thunder gods. You start to ask a follow-up question when the door creaks open. A woman steps in, bent with age. Her cloak, threadbare, her face, a topography of frown lines. She leans heavily on a carved stick and looks around like she disapproves of every visible molecule. Arachne doesn't bother to greet her. She knows who this is. You do too, even if the disguise is solid. This is Athena, goddess of wisdom, war strategy, and regrettably, strong opinions about hubris. She's gone full crone mode today, wrapped in wrinkles and judgment. But the eyes betray her sharp gray too, knowing for any mortal grandmother. Child, the old woman croaks, your work is impressive. But such skill comes from the gods. You should give thanks. Arachne doesn't blink. It doesn't, and I won't. You try to slide behind a loom for cover just in case the heavens decide to respond with instant incineration. But nothing happens. The crone just tilts her head. Blasphemy, she murmurs. It's the truth, Arachne replies, folding a fresh pattern into her current tapestry with what might be described as divine indifference. I taught myself. Every knot, every twist, every dye recipe. They didn't whisper in my ear or spin the wheel for me in my dreams. The room tenses. Even the looms seem to lean away, groaning softly like they'd rather not be involved. Do you not fear punishment? The old woman asks. Should I? Arachne responds, finally setting down her shuttle and turning. Her eyes are calm. Not cocky, just done. I didn't ask for attention, but if they don't like the competition, maybe they should try harder. You're now sweating in 3 different time periods. Historians still argue whether this moment was exaggerated over centuries, whether Arachne's actual words were tamer, humbler, more misunderstood. But here, in this sleepy retelling, she's as blunt as a donkey cart's axle. And whether or not the myth got polished later, the outcome never changed. The old woman straightens. The wrinkles slide from her face like water off marble. Her robe dissolves into gold and white. A helm appears on her brow, its plume of bronze feathers glinting even in the dim light. Her eyes flash not with rage exactly, but with ancient exhaustion. Athena doesn't shout. She just says, then prove it. You try to melt into the wall. Arachne doesn't move, doesn't smile. She simply says, fine. And the challenge is born. A weaving contest, goddess versus girl. No time limit, no theme. Just make something. And let the threads speak for themselves. The villagers are already gathering. Word travels in Boeotia faster than common sense. They creep in through the door, pressing shoulder to shoulder, whispering in awe and panic. You hear someone mutter, she's actually going to do it. And that's when you realize this isn't just a competition. It's art as theology. Loom as battlefield. Threads as weapons. And the prize, well, no one says it out loud, but you suspect it's nothing as simple as bragging rights. No. This is about legacy and survival. Athena sets up her loom with casual grace. It's not even a mortal object. It appears out of the air, shimmering with celestial light, pre-threaded in golden flax, its edges inscribed with runes that softly hum, like lullabies sung by stars. Arachne drags her loom to the center of the room. Hers is wood and grit and clever engineering. A few of the pegs have been replaced with bits of bone or fishhook. The shuttle is nicked, but it fits her hand perfectly. And then they begin. Both start in silence. Shuttles fly. Threads tighten. The villagers hold their breath. Outside, even the wind seems unsure what to do. The room is now filled with rhythm thump thwap, pull twist thump thwap again. And though you sit there surrounded by the divine and the mortal, the sensation is strangely calming. Like a lullaby made of thread. Like the kind of tension you can fall asleep to, not the stormy kind, but the quiet, inevitable pull of fate being written in cotton and wool. You wonder what they're weaving. You wonder how it ends. But more than anything, you wonder if either of them will sleep tonight. The first thing you notice is how differently they move. Athena weaves like a general planning a war map. Each thread is precise mathematical, as if every fiber reports directly to her. Her hands don't just glide, they command. She works with the solemnity of a judge, with the elegance of a calligrapher. No wasted motion, no hint of fatigue. Arachne, by contrast, is a storm in slow motion. Her shuttle zips through the loom like it's flirting with mischief. She hums, yes, actually hums, as she threads silk dyed from crushed murex shells and the pollen of obscure alpine flowers. Her fingers are stained indigo and crimson, and she tugs at the fibers like she's teasing the story into existence rather than building it by force. You can't decide whose rhythm is more hypnotic. The villagers crowding the edges of the room like moths to an extremely tense flame watch in reverent silence. Some shift uncomfortably, trying not to draw divine attention. Others can't tear their eyes away. A baby begins to cry but is quickly shushed with a bundle of wool. Time becomes untrustworthy. Daylight melts into candlelight. And still they weave. Hours in Athena's tapestry starts to take shape. You blink and gasp softly because it's not just good. It's divine. Literally. The scene she weaves is one of cosmic order, Olympus gleaming atop clouds. The gods radiant in their perfect poses, mortals bowing gratefully beneath them. You see herself, Athena, daughter of Zeus, guiding heroes, with wisdom, smiting injustice, inventing the bridal blessing cities, and generally doing goddessy things with extraordinary modesty and grace. It's beautiful. Even you cynical time traveler that you are, feel your breath catch. And yet, you turn to Arachne's loom and your eyebrows lift so high, they almost join your hairline. She's not doing flattery, she's doing tea. Her tapestry shows gods too. Zeus sneaking into mortal beds, disguised as swans and bulls. Apollo, cursing the loves he can't possess. Poseidon, throwing tantrums. Even Dionysus in the corner, dancing with what may or may not be an entire forest. The artistry is perfect. The satire is savage. And Arachne. She's smiling to herself as if to say, go on. Tell me I'm wrong. It's dangerous. It's genius. And historians still argue whether any mortal could have really woven something that vivid, that bold, that accusatory. Some suggest Arachne's tapestry must have been preserved or recopied into murals, pottery, oral tradition. Others say the myth is pure invention woven ironically by the Greeks themselves to explain why hubris never pays. You lean closer and spot a detail in Arachne's work, a scene of Hera turning Io into a cow out of jealousy. The cow has an expression that can only be described as deeply over it. There's comedy here, but it's layered biting, knowing unafraid. And Athena notices. Oh, she notices. She's done with her piece now. The colors glow like fireflies trapped under silk. But her eyes, they're no longer serene. She walks slowly to Arachne's loom. The villagers shrink back as if sensing something divine about to come unglued. You naturally do not move. Because sleep be damned, this is getting interesting. Athena studies the tapestry. Silent, step by step, inch by inch. And for a long moment, it seems she might even nod. A single quiet acknowledgement of genius. But no. Instead, her fingers tighten around her spear. She doesn't raise it. She doesn't need to. Because her voice slices through the room like a dropped spindle. You dare mock the gods in your art! Arachne stands wobbly, exhausted, her fingers trembling from hours of threading. She meets the goddess's glare with something that isn't quite defiance. It's just truth. I showed what happened. Silence. A long, ragged, thread-stretching silence. Then, with one swift movement, Athena rips the tapestry in half. Gasps fill the room. Arachne's face goes pale. You hear a loom crack behind you from the sheer pressure of tension in the air. The pieces of her masterpiece flutter to the ground like wounded birds. And then Athena speaks not in fury now, but in something worse. Disappointment. You had the gift. You could have honored us. But instead you shamed us. You want to yell that truth isn't shameful, but you also very much want to remain unsinged. So you sit still as. Athena raises one hand, and in that gesture, gentle, regretful Arachne begins to change. It's subtle at first, a crick in the neck, a twitching finger. Then her spine curls, her skin pales, her limbs narrow. Her fingers elongate, too many of them now. Her eyes widen, her lips seal, and silk spills from her fingertips like breath. She drops to the floor, legs doubling again, until she is small, until she is something else. Arachne becomes the first spider, not crushed, not erased, just transformed. Athena lowers her hand, turns on her heel, and leaves without another word. No gloating, no smile, just gone. And all that's left in the room is silence. Some sobs, and a tiny trembling creature climbing up a wall, trailing silver thread in her wake. You sit there blinking at the wall, where Arachne, what's left of her, vanished into a crack between two stones. The villagers begin to file out in silence, faces drawn tight with awe, fear, and a deep, rural understanding that divine drama is best left uncommented on. You follow slowly, stepping carefully over the shredded remains of her tapestry, which still gleams faintly with color, even in pieces. Outside, the sky has shifted. It's not darker, just quieter. The clouds hang like breath held too long, and the breeze avoids your face, as if it's afraid of getting caught in the aftermath. No one speaks for a while. Then an old man mutters, "Told her not to brag." A woman snorts. Didn't matter. That goddess was always looking for a reason. And just like that, the myth starts becoming memory. You see it happening right in front of you, the villagers rewriting the narrative. Already the tale is softening around the edges. Arachne becomes the girl who dared. Athena becomes justified, if a little dramatic. The divine gets smoothed, the mortal gets blamed. The gossip settles into comfortable grooves. But you remember. You saw it all. Back at the now empty house, the looms are still. Threads hang like ghost limbs. A cup of barley tea remains unfinished. You wander through the space, half expecting Arachne to return. Maybe human again, maybe defiant and reborn. But no, only spiders, tiny ones, dozens of them tucked in corners, crawling across beams, spinning threads so fine they shimmer like morning dew. They're not afraid of you. One drops onto your sleeve, waves a leg in greeting or possibly judgment, and continues on its way. You sit beside the loom and try to make sense of what just happened. Athena didn't kill her. She could have. You've read enough myths to know how often that happens. Mortals get vaporized for less boasting, spying, wearing the wrong sandals near a sacred pond. But this was mercy, or punishment, or both. Historians still argue whether the transformation was a curse or a compromise. Some say Athena felt pity in the end and gave Arachne a chance to continue weaving in another form. Others think the spider form was meant as eternal humiliation, a reminder that mocking gods gets you demoted to bug status. A few fringe scholars even suggest Athena admired her too much to destroy her entirely, so she rewrote her into nature itself. You watch a spider spin an impossibly neat spiral between two broken reeds and think, well, if this is punishment, it's beautifully efficient. And then it hits you. This isn't just about pride. It's about storytelling. Arachne wove truth. That's what bothered Athena, not the talent, but the content. The stories that showed the gods with messy hair and temper tantrums. The parts they don't include in temple murals. Arachne's tapestry didn't flatter Olympus. It revealed it. And that was the sin. You sigh, lean back, and stare at the ceiling beams, where yet another silk thread glides across the wood. The spiders are busy, constant, graceful in their own tiny way. No looms, no dye pots, just instinct and thread. You wonder if any of them know, if the memory of their ancestor hums in their tiny feet. One crawls along your sandal strap and pauses. You half expect it to whisper, "Spin truth anyway," in a tiny voice, but it just keeps moving. Back in the village square, a few people are sweeping up. The market will reopen tomorrow. Bread will be baked. Children will poke each other with sticks. Life will go on. Maybe someone will try to claim they saw Arachne transformed, but most won't believe it. It'll be called exaggeration, storytelling, myth. You take one last look at the ruined loom, and then you leave. You don't know where you're going exactly. Just away from this echo. Maybe toward the next one. Because once you've watched a mortal become myth, it's hard to go back to regular dreams. A few days later, you're in another town, another square, listening to a traveling bard tell a story to a circle of wide-eyed listeners. The tale sounds familiar. A mortal girl, a weaving challenge, a goddess disguised as an old woman, a final punishment. But the tone is different. This version is less about craft, more about arrogance. The weaver is a braggart. The goddess is wise and kind. The punishment is a mercy from a loving deity. You raise an eyebrow. Revisionist myth-making? Huh. You glance up and notice a spider hanging from the tavern's wooden sign. It lowers itself with all the grace of an empress, then lands on a knot of wood and begins spinning a web. Its threads catch the light in that same impossible shimmer. And you think she's still weaving. Maybe not for the gods, but definitely for the rest of us. You wander farther from Boeotia. Now the hills soft beneath your sandals, the dust less clingy, the air scented with time and slow-growing patience. Villagers fade behind. You, fields, turn golden. And still, something tugs at the corners of your mind like a thread caught in the hem of your thoughts. You can't shake her. Arachne. You dream of her fingers dancing over threads that gleamed like moonlight on olive oil. You keep noticing spiderwebs in places they probably shouldn't be across the rim of your water skin, stretching lazily between two fig trees, even one swaying from the horn of a very patient goat. It's as if the whole world is quietly threaded together, and you've only just now started paying attention. You make your way toward the coast where white marble towns squat near the sea like lazy philosophers. There's more talk of gods here. Shrines on every corner. Little clay offerings left by fishermen and bakers and exhausted moms hoping for a quiet day. But when you bring up Arachne, no one wants to say much. She made the gods look bad. One potter mutters, shaping a bowl with a wobbly edge. You're not supposed to do that. But she wasn't lying. You reply. Still, he says, it's not about truth, is it? And you just blink, unsure how to reply to that. Because maybe he's right. Maybe mythology was never about what happened so much as what should have happened if decorum were a god. Still, your curiosity keeps poking you with a spindle. And so, in a sun-bleached coastal temple dedicated surprise to Athena, you sneak into the archives. It's mostly cracked pottery and moldy scrolls that smell like goat cheese. But one brittle record catches your eye. It's a hymn to the goddess composed by a lesser-known bard named Helicon. Buried deep in the poetic flattery is an odd line. The spider spins in mourning, still for pride undone, yet art fulfilled. You smile. It's subtle, almost hidden. But it's there. A thread of sympathy. Someone remembered. That night, as waves nudge the rocky shore, and the cicadas play their sleepy orchestra. You sit outside a crumbling villa and think about Athena again. Not the dramatic tapestry-ripping Athena of Boeotia, but the quieter one. The one who walked into that dusty room in disguise. The one who watched Arachne's work and for 1 second nearly admired it. What if that 1 second mattered more than the rest? Historians still argue whether Athena's reaction was driven by rage, jealousy, or disappointment. Some claim she felt threatened by mortal creativity. Others insist she was testing Arachne all along. An impossible divine riddle, be great, but not too great. A few fringe thinkers even imagine Athena herself weaving later alone, repeating Arachne's patterns to study them in secret. You try to picture it, the goddess of wisdom bent over a loom in Olympus, silently recreating a scene of Zeus, disguised as a bull shaking her head, with a tight little smile. You chuckle softly. Probably too much to hope for. And yet, the image is strangely comforting, because whether she admits it or not, Athena saw the truth in Arachne's work. And even gods, with all their pride and thunderbolts, sometimes have to squint and accept that someone else may have made something more honest than they'd like. You lie back, staring up at the stars, wondering how many webs are strung between them. Spiders don't sleep much, you've heard. They're always spinning, always rebuilding, even after the broom, the storm, or the divine tantrum. That persistence, it's not defiance. It's just what they do. And maybe that's the real legacy. Not the myth, not the punishment, not even the warning, but the quiet, persistent labor of creation. You drift into dreams laced with silver threads and warm candlelight, wondering if your own thoughts might someday weave something worth remembering. You leave the coast behind, eventually your sandals a little more worn, and your head filled with the soft hiss of sea breeze through olive groves. Inland again, the roads are rougher, the dialects thicker, And yet Arachne lingers in every spindle-shaped shadow you pass. It's in a hilltop village that you hear whispers of a different kind. Not about Arachne directly, but about tapestries. Tapestries no one admits to owning, but everyone seems to describe the same way. Scenes of gods misbehaving, of nymphs running, of mortals trembling, threaded in crimson and shadow always unsigned. Too perfect, too bold. You press for details and finally a shepherd shrugs. Maybe she still weaves, he says. Just not where gods look anymore. That night, you sneak into the village temple not to deface anything, of course, just to look. It's quiet, dusty, and smells faintly of beeswax and burnt offerings. On the back wall hangs a tapestry that no one ever mentions. It's covered by a thick curtain stiff with disuse. You pull it aside, and you gasp. Because this one's different. It shows two women at their looms, one radiant, one tired. Their threads tangle mid-air, their patterns bleed into each other. Above them loom the shadows of gods, indistinct and twitchy, like they've been caught mid-motion, and aren't happy about it. And below mortals, watching, whispering, forgetting. You don't touch it though you want to. Instead, you sit cross-legged on the cool stone and stare until your eyes water. The craft is unmistakable. Every thread is intentional, layered, near invisible in its transition from color to color. This wasn't made by temple hands. It was made by someone who needed to weave. Someone who couldn't stop. And maybe, just maybe, it was left here to be found. Historians still argue about these ghost tapestries. There's no record of who wove them. They appear in temples, palaces, private homes, always anonymously. Some claim they're fakes, clever imitations by students trying to mimic the forbidden myth. Others suggest a quiet tradition of weavers passing down Arachne's patterns in secret. A few, not many, but a few believe she never truly left. That she still weaves. Somewhere. You leave the temple before dawn, the smell of linen and godly guilt clinging to your tunic. Outside, the wind has changed direction. It carries the scent of mountain thyme and something else, silk maybe. Or stories not quite finished. You walk with purpose now, following no road, just instinct. And one day, high in the hills where only goats and very patient gods bother to visit, you find her. She's not a girl anymore. She's not a spider either. She's something in between, a shape of shadows and thread, too many arms to count, eyes like glints on dewdropped web. She doesn't speak. She doesn't scuttle. She just weaves. You don't approach. You don't dare. But you sit quietly on a mossy rock and watch as she spins a new tapestry, this one not of gods or mortals, but of stars. You realize after several stunned minutes that she's mapping the constellations. Not the ones the Greeks named, but others older, more private. Ones shaped like needles, threads, looms. Stories. As the day slips behind the hills, you lie on your side and fall asleep to the sound of her weaving. It's a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, like the tides, like time itself, saying, yes, we continue. In your dreams, you wander her web. Every thread tells a story you've never heard before. One thread sings of a Babylonian potter who made a clay cup that cried. Another hums with the scent of Egyptian linen soaked in rosewater. One weeps softly with the fall of a forgotten queen whose name only thread remembers. And you realize something strange. All the threads lead back to her. Arachne, still weaving, still telling the stories others won't. Still spinning truth where silence had tried to settle. You wake at dawn, covered in silk strands so fine they dissolve when touched. She's gone. No trace. Just the soft impression of her web across the grass. But somehow, you know she's not far. She never is. You head back to civilization, with a head full of silk and myth, carrying more questions than answers. Your tunic is still marked faintly with thread impressions, like a quiet blessing, or an accidental tattoo from a creature that doesn't ask permission. And everywhere you go now, you see weaving. Not just the obvious loom workshops, temple cloth market shawls. No, you see it in cracked mosaics, in the careful braiding of a child's hair, in the way vines wrap themselves around crumbling statues like they're trying to repair what time forgot. Everything is thread, you realize. Some tight, some fraying, some defiant. And that's what brings you to the city of Delphi, land of oracles, omens, and at least 3 types of incense, strong enough to make your eyebrows contemplate resignation. The temple of Apollo looms above, full of whispers and prophecies, and enough cryptic statements to rival your sleep paralysis dreams. But you're not here for Apollo. You're here for a tapestry. In a tucked-away chamber behind the main sanctuary, down a hall, most tourists miss, hangs a work of thread that most priests pretend doesn't exist. It's not officially displayed. No placard, no frame, just a dusty stretch of cloth behind a partition that only reveals itself if you open the wrong or right door. And when you see it, your breath catches. Because this one is funny. Not crude, not cruel, just mischievous. It shows Hermes stealing Apollo's cattle, threading their hooves with bark to disguise their tracks. Ares stuck in a bronze jar, arms crossed in divine pout. Artemis trying to untangle her bow from a fishing net. It's satire, but gentle. The gods look less like villains, more like chaotic co-workers trying to survive eternity without killing each other. And the craftsmanship, it's Arachne, or someone who learned from her, or someone who found her web in the hills and decided to listen instead of fear. The thread is impossibly fine. The expressions are alive. And tucked in the bottom corner just above the hem is a tiny spider embroidered in metallic thread. You chuckle. Out loud. And someone behind you says, "You saw it too, huh?" You turn. It's a scribe, ink-stained fingers, eyes tired in that way that only comes from copying ancient text under oil lamps for 15 years straight. "She visits sometimes," he says, shrugging. They say she leaves one thread in every city that remembers her. Who's they? You ask. He just smiles and pats his scroll. Anyone who doesn't write the official version. Historians still argue whether the Delphi tapestry is genuine. Some say it's a later invention Roman even made to mock the earlier Olympians. Others argue the threads themselves date back far earlier than the current temple walls. But there's no signature, no source. Just the spider. You sit cross-legged on the cold floor and study it for hours. You start to notice things you didn't at first, hidden faces among the cloud scrollwork that resembles looms, even letters so fine they almost vanish, fragments of verses, half poems, and puns that would make a satyr giggle. And then there's a thread. Just one. It trails off the bottom hem loose but unfrayed. Like it's waiting? You reach out and touch it gently. It twitches. Only slightly. But enough to confirm a suspicion this tapestry isn't finished. Or maybe it never will be. You leave the temple without a word, the image burned into your mind. You're beginning to understand what Arachne's real crime was. Not pride, not blasphemy, not even too much talent. It was refusing to stop. When told to kneel, she wove. When warned to praise, she illustrated the truth. When punished, she spun her punishment into art. And now, centuries later, people still see her work and feel something they can't quite name, but they know it doesn't match the official version. It's the unauthorized story, the rejected draft, the whisper that outlasts the shout. You stop to rest beneath a fig tree on the road out of Delphi. A spider descends from a branch and dangles in front of your nose like a tiny pendulum ticking out some ancient message. You nod at it. It nods back, or maybe just sways in the breeze. And then it climbs back up, trailing its thread behind it. Still spinning. Always spinning. You descend from Delphi with your thoughts unraveling like well thread. The spider on the fig branch is long gone, but you swear you can still feel its web brushing your shoulder, a phantom weight of stories that don't quite belong to you. Days pass. You walk dusty miles through sleepy villages, olive groves, and marble ruins that once housed kings, but now mostly shelter cats and moss. And the further you get from the epicenter of gods and temples, the more people are willing to talk. Not about Arachne, no, her name is rarely spoken, but about others who thread truth into silence. There's a potter's wife in Phocis who sews entire epics into shawls she never sells. A shepherd boy in the Peloponnese who carves spiders into every walking stick he whittles. A band of itinerant storytellers who begin each tale with, "You didn't hear this from me, but..." They're not copying Arachne. They're echoing her. She didn't just weave tapestries. She wove permission for others to break rank, to look past the marble statues and see the cracks, to show the gods with olive pits in their teeth and scandal in their sandals. You find yourself in Thebes next, a city that feels like it's constantly arguing with itself. Every building seems to be leaning in a different direction. The streets twist like someone got lost mid-map. But the people have opinions. A local historian, wide-eyed and deeply caffeinated, tells you about the threads of heresy. a lost series of wall hangings said to have been removed from the royal palace after one too many noblewomen fainted. Supposedly, they showed Hera's jealous rages, Apollo's less than consensual conquests, and Hades doing taxes, weirdly. But no one has them. He laments brushing imaginary lint off his tunic. They just disappeared. You raise an eyebrow, or were hidden. He gives you a sly look. You didn't hear this from me, which is how you find yourself in the wine cellar of an old bathhouse crouched beside cracked amphorae and trying very hard not to sneeze from mold spores roughly the age of democracy. The woman guiding you lights a tiny oil lamp and gestures to the wall. And there it is, a tapestry half buried under cobwebs and time. You gasp before you even understand why. It's the gods again, same faces, same symbols, but this time the mortals are front and center. A woman grinding barley beside a statue. A man comforting a wounded soldier while Hermes watches unmoved. A child placing flowers at a shrine no one else sees. This one doesn't mock. It questions. And in the bottom right corner, half faded but unmistakable, is that now familiar signature, a spider stitched in shadow-colored thread. You touch the edge and feel the static of history hum beneath your fingertips. Historians still argue whether these hidden tapestries were ever real. Some call them rebellious gossip stitched in secret. Others think they're metaphors, textile stand-ins for play songs, forbidden texts. But here in the dark, you know better. They exist because someone needed them to. Arachne's punishment didn't silence her. It scattered her. Thread by thread, she stitched herself into other hands, other voices. Not just artists, but potters, musicians, bakers, braiding protest into loaves. Anyone with a pattern and a point. You sit on the cool stone floor and listen to the silence. It's not empty. It's waiting. Because once you start noticing these stories, they won't stop appearing. The mural with a goddess looking confused while mortals calmly run their own city. The coin with a web etched into its edge. The lullaby sung in a dialect no one teaches, but every grandmother seems to know. The story keeps telling itself, and if you listen closely enough, the spiders will guide you. Outside, the sun has dipped low. You emerge from the cellar blinking like someone re-entering the world after a long dream. People pass by laughing, arguing, chasing chickens. Life spins forward. And you've started noticing the threads. They're everywhere now. By now, you walk like someone who expects threads, under every stone, spiders, behind every vine, and stories stitched beneath every seemingly dull surface. The land is quieter here, dotted with crumbling shrines and fig trees that seem to lean closer whenever you speak aloud. You're following no map, but something tugs at your path. Not fate, not prophecy, just curiosity. The kind that hums like a plucked thread every time you pass a half-woven basket or see a child winding string between her fingers into stars. One evening, as the sky melts into the honey-colored haze of dusk, you arrive at a cottage wedged between two hills, like someone tried to hide it from the gods. An old woman greets you before you even reach the gate as if she's been expecting you for years. "I see her in your eyes," she says, handing you a bowl of pomegranate seeds. Or maybe in your questions. You blink. "Who?" She chuckles softly, popping a seed into her mouth. The one who wove too much and spoke too clearly. Inside her home, every surface bursts with texture blankets, wall hangings, knotted ropes that dangle from beams like the beginnings of unfinished thoughts. And in the center a loom, large, worn smooth with use, still strung. The woman moves toward it without thinking, like a musician reaching for their instrument. "She left something behind," she murmurs, "when the gods took her form. Not just the weaving. Not just the skill." She picks up the shuttle and runs it slowly across the warp, producing a sound so soft it might be your own breath echoing. She left the impulse. You sit entranced as her hands begin to work. The pattern takes shape quickly, geometric at first, then suddenly alive. A goat chasing a god. A mortal girl squinting suspiciously at a golden apple. A loom unspooling itself. You ask, "Is this Arachne's?" She shakes her head. "No, it's mine." But you understand the real answer. Historians still argue about the origin of these resonance patterns, motifs found in weavings from vastly different regions and centuries, yet eerily similar. Some call it archetype convergence. Others blame trade routes. A few whisper about an ancestral memory passed down by thread alone. You now have a simpler explanation. She never stopped. She simply passed it on. The old woman lets you try the loom. Your fingers are clumsy at first, all modern twitch, and no patience. But slowly rhythm finds you. Pull. Pass. Beat. Pull again. And the warp begins to respond. Not because you're skilled, but because you're willing. Willing to listen. Willing to see what hides between the lines. You leave the cottage before dawn, the fabric you wove tucked into your belt. It's barely a handspan wide and crooked at the edges, but it holds a shape you didn't plan a small spider. Mid-descent legs arched in question. You don't remember weaving it. But then again, you're not sure you did. That day, you walk through villages and towns with new eyes. You start to spot symbols embedded in the mundane, the way temple curtains fall in deliberate folds, the embroidery on a merchant's sleeve, the rhythm of chanted poetry that always seems to fall into 8-beat sequences like thread counts. Everything loops. Everything returns. And you start to wonder if Arachne's punishment really was about humbling her, or if it was something deeper. A containment. Not to silence her, but to slow her down. Because if left unchecked, her truth would have spread like wildfire across temples' courts and dinner parties. No god would be safe, and yet here you are seeing it anyway. Because truth like silk has a way of sticking to you. That night, you make camp beneath a cypress tree. You hang your crooked cloth nearby, letting it sway in the breeze. Spiders visit one by one, dangling around it like priests circling an altar. They don't speak. They just hang there, still. And that's somehow louder than words. You fall asleep to the sound of thread brushing bark. And in your dreams, you're weaving. Not a tapestry, but a net. For catching stories. By now, even your dreams are threaded. You wake in the morning with fingers twitching against your blanket like they're still working a loom, still chasing patterns behind your eyelids. The crooked little cloth you hung by the cypress tree is gone. No footprints. No thieving hands. Just one long silver strand trailing off into the grass like a thank you note in silk. You take that as a sign. And walk on. The road now pulls you uphill into the soft-bellied mountains of Thessaly, where the air turns crisp, and the goats get suspicious if you look at them too long. In one of the ridgeline towns, barely more than a handful of stone houses, and one very opinionated rooster, you meet a weaver who doesn't weave. Instead, she repairs. Looms, mostly. Broken ones. Warped frames, snapped cords, pegs chewed on by bored children or ambitious rats. Her hands are calloused, her tools handmade, her temper short. But when you mention Arachne, her eyes flick up. I don't say her name. She says flatly, then gestures for you to sit. But I know what she taught. She lets you help her mend a loom, a massive contraption made for tapestries so large they could be worn by buildings. As you work, she talks not of Arachne directly, but of the aftershocks. People think it ended with the spider, she says, tightening a leather band with a grunt. But the gods didn't just punish her, they punished the idea of her. You pause, thread in hand. What do you mean? She wipes her hands on her apron. Every weaver since has had to choose honor the gods or honor the truth. And most pick safe patterns. You look around her shop, bare walls, dusty shelves, nothing hung for show. And I pick repairs, she shrugs. Safe enough. But I leave the broken threads exactly as they snapped. You stare at her, unsure whether that's cowardice, rebellion, or art. She doesn't clarify. Later that night, she invites you to her small courtyard, where a few locals have gathered. There's barley stew, weak wine, and a silence that tastes of reverence. One by one, the villagers begin to share stories, not loud, not polished, just murmured truths. One woman describes a dream she had of a spider with eyes like lamps weaving cities from shadows. A boy talks about seeing patterns in lightning strikes. An old man claims he once saw Athena at a crossroads weeping beneath a fig tree. No one laughs. Because here, myth is not past tense. It's ambient. It hangs in the air like smoke and expectation. And then a man quiet until now pulls something from a basket, a folded cloth wrapped in oilskin and older than anything in the courtyard. He unwraps it carefully, fingers trembling. It's a tapestry, small only about the width of your arm span. And yes, there it is again. That craftsmanship, those impossible gradients of thread. It shows a single figure seated at a loom alone in a great hall, while behind her 100 gods watch in silence, their faces half-turned, half-shadowed. The mortal doesn't look frightened. She looks focused, unbothered. And, in the upper right corner, faint, but glinting a spider. Of course, no one asks where he got it. No one dares. They just sit with it heads bowed like it's an icon. You reach out to touch the hem and feel the now familiar hum beneath your fingertips, like recognition from something older than marble and myth. Historians still argue whether these travelers' cloths were the work of an Arachnean cult, a long-lost guild of rebel weavers, or just coincidences spiraling into pattern. But here in this courtyard, there is no argument. Only silence, and reverence, and the soft, undeniable pull of a truth that refuses to unravel. As the fire dies down, you ask the loom repairer why no one speaks her name aloud. She stares into the embers. Because it wakes the gods, but you all believe in her. We don't need belief, she says. We have thread. You leave the next morning at dawn, escorted by the same rooster, who has now adopted you as either rival or cousin. In your pack is a small pouch the repairer handed you before bed. No explanation, just a nod. Inside is a single wooden shuttle worn smooth and carved with a spiral that matches the web of a very specific spider. You run your thumb over it and keep walking. The road winds down into mist, into valleys that look like the folds of a blanket recently tossed aside by a sleeping titan. And you wonder if the gods still think of her, and if they dream in thread too. The mist never quite leaves as you descend into the valley. It clings to your hair, your sleeves, your thoughts. It curls around trees and sheep, alike blurring the line between world and dream. And somewhere inside that haze you start to feel it again, the presence you can't name. Not a god, not quite, but something watching. You pass shrines to Demeter, Hermes, even a weather-beaten pedestal that might have once held a statue of Hera, now occupied by a very judgmental goose. Yet none of them stir your thoughts like the tiny cobweb you see stretched across a forgotten trail marker. Not flashy, not perfect, but just present. A signature in silence. You follow it. The path narrows, curls, then opens unexpectedly into a grove of ash trees, their leaves flickering like threads in a loom wind. In the center is an altar older than style, older than marble. Just a slab of stone ringed with broken spindle whorls and burnt olive pits. And, on the altar cloth, just a scrap. Torn at the edge, faded. But it pulses with the same precision you've come to recognize. Not a finished tapestry this time, but a remnant. Something mid-story. Threads unraveling into nowhere, patterns halting mid-gesture. You stare at it, then sit, and stay. Hours pass. Or minutes. You can't tell anymore. But as you watch the cloth shift softly in the breeze, your mind fills with images, scenes not told, not sung, not even remembered by temple lore. You see mortals crafting tools while gods look on puzzled. You see a woman scolding Apollo for interrupting her nap. You see a weaver Arachne, or someone like her laughing as she teaches children how to dye with beetroot and crushed flowers. And you realize something quietly shocking. She wasn't trying to shame the gods. She was trying to balance the story. Historians still argue whether Arachne's work was satire, protest, or just the aesthetic honesty of someone who couldn't lie with her hands. Some say she was the first visual historian, others say she was simply tired of everyone pretending the gods never made mistakes. A few fringe thinkers, often ignored, insist that her weaving wasn't about critique at all, but remembrance. Because the gods forget. But the threads don't. You lean forward, brushing the altar gently, and that tiny remnant of cloth lifts, just for a moment, as if breathing. And underneath it, carved into the stone, a single line in ancient, barely legible script. I remember what they erase. You sit back, heart thudding, because that's the secret, isn't it? Myths are written by victors and temples, but weaving remembers everything. Even the parts too small, too human, or too embarrassing to carve in marble. And spiders. They spin without asking permission. You rise from the grove, lighter, quieter, not with grief, but with clarity. A knowing that her legacy isn't a tragedy. It's a system, a network. Every spinner, every thread, every whispered story about gods dropping the ball or mortals daring to speak up. Each is a strand in the web she left behind. And the web is growing. You begin to notice people connected to it. A boy selling fish who hums a tune about Athena's temper. a stonemason who carves goddess feet with unflattering ankles, a market seamstress whose embroidery shows Dionysus losing his sandal in a grape press, little acts, tiny rebellions, art as memory. The gods may not like it, but they can't stop it. Not anymore. Because Arachne isn't one woman not anymore. She's everyone who threads truth into silence. Everyone who weaves a version that doesn't match the official hymn. Everyone who refuses to unsee what they've seen. You camp under the ash trees that night, webbed by starlight and silence. The grove hums not loudly, but like a heart remembering how to beat. You dream of spinning wheels in long corridors of cloth, endless and shifting. And always at the far end of the hall a spider. Waiting, not judging, just weaving. Still, you follow the river east, now a silver ribbon, winding through poppy fields and sleepy hamlets where the children still play knucklebones with bits of pottery, and the elders speak more with their hands than their mouths. The land here is older than stories so old that it barely notices them. But that makes it the perfect place to find the ones that have fallen through the cracks. You stop in a village where the well is carved with patterns you've seen before, loops, curls, and spirals like webs in stone. The mason insists they're just decorations, but when you trace your fingers along them, you can feel the rhythm of a shuttle's pass. It's not decor, it's code. And it's everywhere. The edge of a serving dish shows a dancing girl twirling beneath what looks suspiciously like a loom's warp threads. A fresco in the local bathhouse shows Athena recognizable only by her helmet, struggling to thread a needle the size of a goat. Someone here has a sense of humor. Or maybe a memory. You finally find what you're looking for in the back of a shop that sells linen in exactly 2 colors, whitish and not quite white. The shopkeeper is an older woman who eyes you like someone measuring cloth she already knows she won't sell. But when you mention Arachne not as a myth, but as the weaver, she tilts her head. You want the old cloths then. She doesn't take you to a treasure room or hidden archive. She simply opens a chest beneath her work table, unceremoniously tossing aside a sleeping cat in the process. Inside are folded fabrics worn thin, frayed at the edges, discolored in spots. They're not protected. They're used. Aprons, pillow covers, bandages sometimes, she says, digging through. My grandmother said we should keep the old patterns moving. And there they are. Motifs hidden in geometry. A feather that up close is actually a row of weavers. A border of ivy that becomes spiders when seen from the right angle. The more you look, the more you see. You sit on the floor and unfold them all. Each cloth feels different. Alive somehow. The shopkeeper sits across from you and starts picking lint from a tunic with the bored precision of someone who's heard 1,000 versions of the same lie. They never wanted us to tell the truth, she says after a long silence. But cloth doesn't care about temples. She gestures toward a frayed square showing a temple facade perfectly rendered except for the fact that one of the columns is a loom. It's a joke, but also a jab. Did your grandmother know Arachne's story, you ask? She shrugs. She remembered it. Different thing. You ask what she means. She didn't repeat what the priests said, the woman replies. She told what the threads kept showing. Historians still argue whether weaving traditions like these were conscious subversion or accidental inheritance. Some claim mortal hands replicated the patterns out of habit, not heresy. Others insist the Arachne code was a secret language passed from mother to daughter, encoded into cloth like lullabies you hum but don't question. The truth is always somewhere tangled in the middle. You buy nothing from the shop, but she hands you a scrap anyway. A napkin-sized piece showing a girl and a spider seated at a loom together, both working in tandem, their threads crisscrossing into a shared pattern. No one ever wants that one, she says, already turning back to her cat. That night, you sleep beside the river, the cloth folded under your head. You dream of conversations in thread, no sound, just the pull and tug of truth trying to surface. In your dream, you're in a hall filled with tapestries. None are complete. Some unravel as you walk past. Others reweave themselves while you watch. And in the center, one loom sits waiting empty. You step toward it. A shuttle appears in your hand, and a voice soft amused whispers, "Show them what they forgot." You wake with the thread voice still lingering in your ears, and a spider on your knee. Just sitting, not moving, but somehow you know it's watching. You nod. It leaves, and you keep walking. Not to find more cloths, but to remember the ones you've already seen, because memory is a kind of weaving too. By now your path isn't led by temples or towns or even maps. It's led by threads, whispers of silk and patterns that seem to emerge from the dust, like dreams trying to be remembered. You start noticing them everywhere, not just in cloth, but in structure. The way the stones in a courtyard spiral outward from a central hearth. The radial layout of grain silos in a distant farming village. Even the layout of a long abandoned theater where seating curves like the inner structure of a web, designed not just to view, but to gather. In the city of Corinth, you stumble upon an artisan quarter where every other building seems involved in thread in some way. Loom makers, spindle carvers, dye sellers whose hands are permanently tinted purple, blue, or beet red. And at the center of it all is a man who dyes silk. Imported, he says, holding up a spool so delicate it seems like breath might break it. But we spin it with our own stories. He invites you into his workshop not because you look important, but because you look interested. Inside the walls are covered in samples. Not for sale, just preserved, pinned like butterflies, labeled only with the names of the weavers. You see one signed Thera, another Dorpe, and one simply A. You raise your eyebrow. The man shrugs. She never signed more than that. He hands you a cloth barely the size of a handkerchief and you squint. The pattern looks like sea waves, at first layered and flowing. But as you tilt it, the waves become threads. Then people. Then waves again. She called it flood and fiber, he says. Said stories rise and fall, but thread remembers the low tide. You're speechless, not because it's beautiful, but because you recognize the rhythm. Not the image, but the cadence. The same strange harmony that filled the other tapestries. You run your hand along the edge and feel a bump, a tiny knot, deliberate woven in reverse. She always ended with a knot, the man says quietly. Not to bind it, but to remind herself where to start next time. Historians still debate whether this tradition, the final reverse knot, was rooted in practical technique or spiritual belief. Some say it was a mnemonic device. Others believe it was symbolic, an invitation to the next weaver to pick up where the last left off. A chain of defiance, one thread at a time. You walk the artisan quarter for hours, touching everything not to own it but to witness it. Every shawl, every table runner, every sash worn by an apprentice has meaning now. You know what to look for. The spider motifs hidden in borders, the weavers tucked inside floral loops, the final knot sometimes stitched in a slightly off color, as a quiet nod to those who know. That night you attend a festival by accident. It seems to erupt from nowhere. A wedding maybe. A harvest. No one can agree, but the square floods with music, firelight, and linen dyed in colors that make your jaw ache with joy. And there in the flickering firelight you watch as two women perform a dance, arms weaving in and out of each other, their sashes trailing behind them like threads. Their steps mirror the shuttle's pass. One leads, the other follows, then they switch. Over and over. You look closer. Their sashes bear spiders, tiny ones near the hem. You nudge a bystander. Who are they? The Thread Sisters, he says like it's obvious. They open the festival every year. You press why the spider. He smirks, because it always knows where to start. And just like that, the music swells, and you feel it, not joy, not fear, but connection. The sense that you are not outside the story anymore. You're part of the thread now, walking within the pattern, carried gently by it. You sleep on a rooftop that night, belly full of honey cakes, mind full of stars. Above you, the constellations wheel slowly in the heavens. But you no longer see Orion or Andromeda or Perseus. You see patterns. You see threads. You see a sky woven by something older than fear, and at its center a quiet shape with 8 patient legs. You wake with the dawn whispering against the tiled rooftop, as if even the sun is now spun from thread. Below, the city still sleeps. Only a few early risers drift through the alleys. Vendors rolling carts, a boy chasing a chicken, and a spider suspended from a laundry line, like a drop of night reluctant to fall. You descend, shoulders light, but your mind heavier with knowing. There's one last place calling you. Rome. Yes, that Rome. A few hundred years ahead now in culture, steel, and self-importance. You journey westward over sun-baked hills and dry plains, past columns snapped like breadsticks and villages rebuilt under new names. The empire is spreading, pulling stories with it, like a great net, and you want to see what's happened to her in the process. You arrive in a city both glorious and slightly annoyed with itself. Rome is bustling, bloated, efficient, and obsessed with appearances. Myth here is carefully pressed into coin sculpture and street theater. Nothing left wild. Nothing left unofficial. So you start in the one place that still leaks secrets: the laundry yards. Among the chatter of washerwomen and the rhythmic slap of cloth against stone, you find something. It's subtle. A woman humming a lullaby in an old Greek dialect, twining her washing cords into loops that form an unmistakable spiral. Another with tattoos along her arms, not military, not fashionable. Just tiny linework patterns that look like something worn into the skin by repetition, not ink. You ask one gently about Arachne. She hesitates, then almost too quietly to hear. We don't call her that. We call her La Filatrice, the spinner. She glances around, then pulls a folded cloth from her satchel. It's plain at first glance, coarse linen, sun-bleached. But when she tilts it in the light, a design emerges: a woman seated on a stool, a spider perched on her shoulder like a bird. She watches the woman, says, folding it quickly again. And we remember. Historians still argue whether the Roman version of Arachne softened her story or simply buried it beneath civic pride. Ovid, the famed poet, recorded her tale with elegance and detail, but with a flourish that made her seem like a cautionary fable. His Arachne was arrogant, defiant, pitiable. But that's not how the spinner lives on here. She's not pitied. She's preserved. You follow the trail of whispers to a domus on the Aventine Hill home, to a wealthy widow who collects rare tapestries. She receives you in a shaded courtyard surrounded by columns wrapped in vines so precisely trimmed they might be trained. She's sharp-eyed, witty, and drinks wine like it's tea. When you mention you're studying lost textiles, she grins like someone who just opened a trapdoor under your feet. Oh, darling. You mean the thread work. She leads you to an inner chamber and unlocks a wooden chest the size of a bathtub. Inside are folded tapestries, each tucked between scrolls and wax tablets, as if being archived rather than displayed. She pulls one out, and your breath leaves you. It's Roman in color palette, deep red gold indigo, but the style is pure echo. There's Athena, but her face is hidden. There's Arachne not as a girl, not as a spider, but as something new. A woman with too many arms holding looms, needles, spindles, and scrolls. Around her other figures, Roman, Greek, unnamed, each with thread connecting their hands. The widow watches your face. They tried to erase her, but someone kept spinning. She replaces the cloth carefully. They always do. You leave Rome with your mind knotted in paradox. The city tries to own every story label it paraded. Yet still, the spider survives, stitched into sleeves, murmured in dye baths, pressed into lintels where even the patricians forget to look. The spinner doesn't need temples anymore. She has kitchens, schools, laundries, corners of marketplaces. Everywhere people gather, she's listening, watching, spinning. You leave Rome quieter than you arrived. It's not that the story's ended, far from it. But you feel it, settling into you. Now, like a thread laid gently across your shoulders, no longer asking to be chased. Just acknowledged. Just worn. You wander the countryside with no destination. Through fields where wildflowers bend in geometric arcs, and vines twine themselves into quiet spiral patterns. Even the birdsong feels deliberate, looping, rhythmic. Maybe it always did. One morning beneath a fig tree older than any nearby home, you find a woman weaving. Not in a shop, not on display, just on a small loom nestled between her knees. Her fingers work with casual fluency like brushing hair. You sit beside her without speaking. She smiles, but does not stop. You watch as colors bloom across her loom, ochre, rust, sky blue. The pattern is soft, abstract, at first glance meaningless. But then you see it a spiral, a spider, a loom, all hidden in the folds, emerging and vanishing like breath. You ask her who taught her. She shrugs. My grandmother, or maybe my dreams. You ask her what she's weaving. She shrugs again. Whatever the threads, remember? And you finally truly understand. The spinner isn't a goddess. She's a choice. Every time someone picks up a shuttle or a needle or a thread and refuses to lie with it, every time a truth is embroidered, where a silence once settled, Arachne spins again. Historians still argue over her, but the threads don't argue. They endure. That night you sleep by a river lullabied by frogs and soft wind. And in your dream you're standing in a vast hall of cloth. Endless, rippling, alive. Each tapestry shows a moment, a truth. Told a lie, challenged, the story preserved. A young boy weaving a map of a city that no longer exists. An old woman threading her name into the hem of her own burial shroud. A baker embroidering spider motifs into her daughter's apron for luck. And you. There's a loom waiting. You pick up the shuttle. It fits perfectly in your hand. You begin to weave, not to impress, not to defy, just to remember. Each thread soft, warm, necessary. And as you work, you see her. Not across the hall, not far away, but beside you. Arachne. Still weaving, still watching, still laughing softly when the colors tangle. Her form shimmers sometimes. Girl sometimes, spider sometimes, a shape so perfectly in between it can't be named. She does not speak. She doesn't need to. You already know what she would say. And somewhere faint but steady you hear the quiet cadence of the loom. Thump, pull, weave, truth. Word count. Winches client. Jofufo snowparlies. Hanonder sidres. Wind down. 300 words. And now. The loom stills. The thread grows slack. The shuttle rests quietly beside your hand. You lie back beneath the vault of your own imagination, wrapped not in linen, but in story. One that drifted through centuries, carried by whispers, pinned into fabric, folded in corners, and finally offered to you. The world, even when chaotic, even when loud, is still full of weavers. Quiet ones. Patient ones. The spinner's legacy doesn't blaze like a comet. It hums like a thread passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. Wherever there is cloth, there is memory. Wherever there is silence, there is the potential to stitch something into it. Maybe you've never held a loom, but you've held a thread of truth, of curiosity, of kindness, and chosen what to do with it. That's weaving too. So let your breath slow now like the shuttle's last pass. Let your thoughts soften like linen left in the sun. Let the world unravel gently around you, not in chaos, but in stillness, in release. And if you listen closely as you sink deeper into the folds of your own sleep, you may just hear the whisper of thread. Arachne's rhythm. Still weaving, still with you, always.